David Jacobs. You want to round him up? Good morning. Thanks for coming. We're going to get started. Good morning. Welcome to the October 3rd North County Estate Planning Council meeting of 2023 here. We're thrilled to have you all. Fantastic presentations in order. We've got Dana Telford with the Family Business Consulting Group going through a case study on family business succession planning. For those who got here early, be sure to get a copy of the handouts up front, or we'll have them distributed. David, you want to roll those around for anybody that missed those? Thrilled to have you all here. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. Our next meeting is November 7th, always the first Tuesday of the month. RJ Kelly and a panelist will be presenting on charitable income tax planning when you hit a home run, sale of real estate, sale of a business, sale of a business stock. Upcoming meetings, we've got December 5th. Robert Valera and William Exeter of Exeter 1031 Exchange Services, a real national expert in that arena, are really going to fine tune and dive into like-kind exchanges of real estate and all the planning that goes around with that. January 2nd, we are meeting first Tuesday of the month. Topic is just being fine-tuned as we speak. Real quickly, I certainly want to honor RJ Kelly of the Wealth Legacy Group, Inc. for suggesting a spot in the meeting to highlight one of our nonprofits, and we have a real interesting one shortly. But in the meantime, I've got Matt Adams of Corient, which is formerly CI Dowling and Yankee. Matt.
So, quick icebreaker to start. How many of you out here like pickleball? The silly sport they're playing out here. Good, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, I play here at Lomas sometimes. How many people like Halloween? How many people like kids? So hopefully most of us here. So you're all invited to Pickle Boo, the inaugural pickleball event for charity. I sit on the board of the Angels Foster Family Network. Angels serves the most vulnerable foster youth. Their resource families serve these kids that are age 0 to 5, so just infants and toddlers. Great organization. We're having a big event at Bobby Riggs, end of October. You can dress up if you want. So if you like pickleball, there's a QR code at the back of your little packet here. Sign up. If you could pass it around your network, that would be awesome. It's going to be a great event for a great cause. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about a couple hot topics that we're looking at with clients recently and talk about our name change as well. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, like Bill said, Dowling & Yankee is now Corient. So DNY has been one of the top independent fiduciary RIA firms in town for the past 30 plus years. A couple of years ago, we decided to join with the CI Financial network of other RIAs across the country, and it's grown. We've gone from, a $6 billion RIA in San Diego to now close to $150 billion RIA with offices across the country. So Corient is actually the name of our legacy Newport Beach office with CI Financial, and it means clients at the core or client oriented. Next slide. So some financial planning hot topics here. We could talk about each of these for an hour, but I'll go through them rather quickly. So the first one with market concentration in the Mag 7, you guys all know the Mag 7 out there that have driven market returns in really both directions the past couple of years. The Apple, the Amazon, Tesla, NVIDIA, et cetera. This year through January through May, those 7 stocks drove almost the entire market performance for the S&P, right? And then we saw a broader market rally in June and July, and then obviously the pullback we've had and a bit of volatility in August and September. But the opposite was the case last year, right? The NASDAQ was down 33%, the S&P was down close to 20%, and a lot of that had to do with these handful of stocks. So it is kind of a case study for diversification for the most part. And definitely it can swing both ways. Interest rates and the opportunity cost of cash, with inflation, hopefully not a lot of your clients are just sitting in cash and savings and checking accounts at this point in time. You can go out to Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab and get 5+% on a money market fund. You can get 5.4% on a 1-month T-bill right now. So certainly get some of that cash invested unless there's a reason. Otherwise, there's a lot of yield to be had in short-term cash equivalent investments right now. Roth conversions and charitable giving strategies. So this is a pretty evergreen topic for our clients, right? So the typical client with Roth conversions might be in their mid to late 60s. They're retired. They're in a lower marginal tax bracket now, and they might be delaying Social Security income until 70. They're not taking RMDs until 73 plus. And so it's a perfect time in that lower marginal tax bracket to push through some partial Roth conversions year over year. And a lot of times we like to couple that with a donor advised fund contribution. So bunch some donor advised funds with some appreciated stock. There you go. And then offset some of that ordinary income from the Roth conversion. There's also backdoor Roths. There's mega backdoor Roths in company plans. So certainly some Roth conversion planning out there. For your clients that are over 70 and a half, really the most tax efficient way to give is via QCDs. So making a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. So you don't have to be taking RMDs. You just have to be over 70 and a half with an IRA, even if your RMDs don't start until 73 plus with the law change. Lifetime giving and the exemption sunset. So a lot of our clients gift up to their annual exclusion amount, which is $17,000 a year right now. They gift that to their kids, their grandkids. They gift that to fund college savings plans, right? 529 plans. You can super fund a 529 plan. So annual gifting is really important. You kind of chip away at your estate over time. So if you've got years or decades, that's a good wealth transfer technique. Year over year over year, it really starts to compound. But when it comes to the exemption sunset, that's happening at the end of 2025, the current exemption amount we all know is $13 million a person. And so for your ultra high net worth client, that's $40–50 million range, right? You can probably afford to gift your entire exemption amount, or both you and your spouse, if you have one, the exemption amounts together, and you might still be in the taxable estate realm at the end of the day. So it makes more sense. It's a little more clear cut if that's in the cards. But for that client that's in the $10–15 million net worth range, it depends, right? It's a gray area. If the exemption amount goes down to inflation adjusted $7 million a person, then it really depends on their personal goals, what their spend rate is, what they plan on gifting to charity, what they want to gift with their kids or their beneficiaries. So definitely a more nuanced conversation where you want to run a retirement projection for them or different projections to see what that looks like with their legacy assets. On the death of Inc. planning, Bill and I were talking about this a couple months ago. Basically, California shut the back door on Inc. planning. So this happened in New York a few years back, where if you don't know what an ING is, it's a incomplete gift non-grantor trust. And so what someone would do, if you've heard of wings or nings or dings, and Steve Oceans, he's one of the estate planning attorneys out of Vegas that was pitching these for years, right? And I'm sure he's probably not answering phone calls at this point in time, but for California residents, you transfer an asset to one of these out-of-state nings, let's say, and then you have a liquidity event, and then you're trying to avoid California state income tax on that income event. And so California legislature has come down this summer and said, no more of this. We're going to treat that income, not as grantor trust income, but as grantor trust income in California and tax it. So from January 1st, 2023 forward, anyone with an ING structure, that income is going to get taxed in California. In 2022, 2021, and previous years, you can kind of chalk that up as a win for now, but tread lightly, because if you're a California resident still, or that client is, if you take a distribution, that income is going to get taxed. And so someone has to leave the state to a zero tax state to take future distributions, but California also has look back, clawback rules, I think, 5 years back. So tread lightly. It's, you're skating on thin ice with this kind of planning. And, I've got a couple client cases I'm working through with the professional team. And so if you want to chat about this at some point in time afterwards, let me know. Last slide. Yeah, otherwise, let us know if you have any questions. Myself, Mike Brown couldn't make it today. He's also a CPA. We're both ex-Deloitte guys. Anna Diaz, Brett Pernicano's right over here too. They're certified exit planners and love talking about succession planning. We've got, I think, 20 advisors now, from associate advisors up to partners in our office. And we're always looking for great new talent too. So if you know someone who's excellent in our space, we'd love to talk to them too. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Matt, thanks so very much. I guess I should mention, Dale is still active, isn't he? Dale Yonke? There you go. Everyone knows Dale. He's not big for the early morning meetings, but except maybe for golf. Also want to mention Hope Carlson, who kind of has a special passion about philanthropy, another great member of the team. Real quickly, I want to introduce Jim Green, our member over here, a member of our council, and a recent participant in our nonprofit spotlight, who was going to be headed up by Leslie Granger, but she got COVID. So we're not dealing with her, but Honor Flights of San Diego is an organization that deals with taking veterans from World War II, Korea on forward, back to DC for a big wild weekend of many activities. And we're here certainly to spotlight them, but we're teeing up a video by their CEO. Yes, sorry.
I'm Julie Brightwell, the chairman of Honor Flight San Diego, and Honor Flight changes lives. My father, Earl Mann, was a World War II veteran, and I got involved with Honor Flight by taking him on his flight in 2008, and have been involved with Honor Flight ever since, watching it transform people, veterans. It thanks them for their service and lets them know that they are still valued and appreciated for what they did. For all of us that volunteer with Honor Flight, we get more than we give, just like the old saying. It makes connections with these veterans who are often elderly, our World War II and Korea War veterans, at a time in their lives when they're losing family and friends, and now they have a new Honor Flight family. Honor Flight San Diego has the most caring team of volunteers to really make these veterans feel special and to thank them for what they've done for us. We appreciate it, and it comes from our heart. And we want the veterans to know that it's not just us, but it's really this whole country now is thanking them for their service.
So Jim Green participated in the Honor Flight to DC this last weekend. Can you?
I put on my hat because you may not recognize me otherwise. You would have seen me yesterday morning on KUSI with the director of public relations and another nice lady who introduced me to the thing and happened to have some connection with KUSI. So I'm not a war hero. I've said that. I volunteered for the draft in 1953 when I was just 18 years old. And fortunately, with the training earlier, I was end up going to Germany as part of the occupation troops rather than the only shooting. I kept my head down and that basic training, bullets are going over your head. So I was fortunate, and I ended up in Frankfurt, Germany, and they didn't have their sovereignty back yet. So we were in charge of all the U.S. troops in Germany at that time. And I got involved I'll tell you very quickly. I don't have much time. I was a stenographer, and I was involved in the inspector general, and I did a lot of inspections or investigations, including some people who had then filed a racial prejudice case against the Army, because Truman had just desegregated the Army in 1949, I believe, in the early 50s, and that's the case. And I worked on that and took sworn statements, and I won't go into the details, but from that I got promoted. So I worked for all people that were West Point graduates, have a lot of respect for those people. The ring knockers, they call them, but that's the joke. But anyway, they're wonderful people, and I was fortunate. So I was there representing the legacy of my military family, starting with I have two nieces that drove out from Indiana, 9 hours to meet with us, and they brought these things with me. And there's my great-great-grandfather in the Civil War. So my French relatives and my Irish relatives both fought in the and made national news. It was on the University of Washington campus publication, but it was picked up by the national news. So I'm forever grateful. You look up the word wonderful, it's overworked today, but these people that do this thing are wonderful. My Lizzie and her husband are and he was a fighter pilot. He was shot down. He was a prisoner of war. And here he is getting back taking all these guys. So there are 85 of us. My roommate is 90 years old. He's he's an Air Force guy, and he's right here from Escondido. So we got a long, real like two peas in a pod. And his daughter and son-in-law came as well. So the family joined. They took them on a bus, and I just got a call how they enjoyed meeting my nieces. So this is totally unexpected. I didn't know they were going to do this. So, but I didn't have any military paraphernalia. So I dug this out as a certificate that happened to have the 5th Corps logo on it. And I gave all my Army stuff to my son, and he must have taken it seriously because he just retired from the 82nd Airborne Division. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jim. You can find the video with Jim on KUSI on YouTube. Or let me know. I've got it and watched it yesterday. He had to have been one of the greatest guests they've ever had, so it was fascinating. But certainly, as we all have older relatives, older friends, grandparents, great grandparents, what have you, this is quite an honor filled with veterans and celebrating their service. So let me know. The information's been in your meeting announcements, and it's on the flyer. Oh yeah, no cost. So they take care of everything. So thank you so much, Jim. Thank you, Leslie. Hope you're feeling better. Certainly want to have Pete Tentler mention real quickly about the trifectas.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Thanks for everybody for showing up. Those that are here regularly and those that are here for the first time. The council created what we call the trifecta. At the end of the meeting, I'm going to take your business card. I'm going to pair you up with 2 other people. Hopefully it'll be people that will complement your industry. Get together for breakfast, coffee, lunch, happy hour. Hopefully in person. If you have to, do it virtual. But this is an opportunity not to solicit one another. Okay. But this is your opportunity to showcase what it is that you do to serve your clients, and hopefully there'll be some collaboration. If anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know. And please, let's be professional. Don't wait for the other person to contact you. Once you get the email, as soon as you can, reach out and get something on the calendar as soon as possible. Thank you.
Before I introduce our speaker, I want to introduce Brett Pernicano of Corient. Going to take me a while to get that one right, but Brent's part of the business exit planning series that the council has, and was part of the panel that presented in April. But Brett's a partner and wealth advisor in the San Diego office of Corient. He's been with the firm Dowling and Yankee for a number of years. A great deal of experience in a broad range of areas, but certainly the financial services arena. but particularly has a big background in families with businesses and, looking at the decision of selling the business or not. And of course, this is the parallel choice, family business succession planning. So Brett will be up in just a sec. And then Dana Telford, he's with one of the advisors with a national firm of, Family Business Consulting Group. If you remember Joanne Norton, who presented a number of years ago here, that was the firm that she walked in. Now, Dana, this is all he does 7 days a week, 365. So I call this world the people side of planning. Certainly a lot of financial planning and business analysis and so on and so forth that goes through that. But Dana's really going to dive into the myriad of issues that pops up in the family business succession world. Without any further ado, Brett, this is yours.
Thank you, Bill. As a quick kickoff, thank you, Jim. For those of you that have been in San Diego a while, you may recognize Pernicanos. My family back in the late 40s came here from Detroit. 10 brothers and 1 sister, and they all opened up Pernicanos pizza restaurants. And some are still around. There's one in El Cajon that's been there for 70 years. And Jim, just so you know, all 10 brothers were in the Army, and they all survived World War II. And so pretty incredible. Yeah. And only one lost an eye, Uncle Jim. He was 98 when he passed away, and he still could drive all the way till he was 95. I don't know why they let him drive, but he has one eye. And the last honor flight that was given to one of them was when he was in his late 80s, Uncle Johnny. He's the one that has the pizza restaurant in La Jolla that many people know. He did the honor flight in 2018. So thank you so much for that. To business exit planning. No, sorry, business succession planning. Apologize. I sat here a couple months ago for everybody. Had a really good time talking through kind of the planning of business exits. But I think one of the things that I harped on during that process was we talk about the technical aspects. We talk about the tax aspects. We talk about the estate planning aspects, the law. But I think the biggest piece that we need to overcome is the soft stuff. It's the personal aspect of the transaction. And it doesn't always mean that there's a transaction where we're selling to an outside party. It could actually be an internal succession of the business to a second or third generation. And so, I think it's an area that really needs to be focused on by the entire team, because that is the part that usually is the biggest hurdle. It's not, am I going to get 25 million or 23 million? It's how are my kids going to be set up for success for the rest of their lives and their kids' lives. And so having Dana involved in this process is incredibly important. And so without further ado, I'm going to let Dana come up and start talking a little bit more about that aspect of the transaction. And I'll be here to facilitate.
Is this on? It is on. And I need to be conscious of this camera. I'm now learning. Good morning. My name is Dana Telford. I'm a partner with the Family Business Consulting Group. We are based in Chicago. I live in San Clemente. I wanted to say thank you to San Clemente, Bill Super and Corey, and able to meet Brett here to fill in for Corey. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a live case that I'm working on to give you a sense of what we do at the Family Business Consulting Group, and to delve a little deeper into, as you said, the people issues related to succession planning, related to exit planning. They're complicated, as you know. You don't get very far into life advising wealthy families without realizing that if people, for instance, hate each other, as one of the first pieces of information I got from a recent client, it's difficult to get them to come together with a plan and to have some sort of an alignment about what they're going to do. And so go ahead and head to the presentation. This all started for me. So I'm 55 years old. I was at Harvard Business School as an MBA student, didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated from business school. and took a course called Managing a Family Business. And I started to learn about the complexities of family business. I come from a family business. My grandfather started a trucking company years ago. And my mom kind of was in a real estate business, is what I learned. I didn't even know if I was in a family business, and it was a prerequisite for this course. So I started talking with her about like, why do you always argue with your brothers, my uncles? Like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, we have a family business and you're part of it too. And I thought, oh, that would have been good to know earlier on. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But while I was there, I read a speech that Doris Kearns Goodwin gave at a commencement. I think it was at Princeton. And in it, she talked about helping Lyndon Johnson write his memoirs. And she said, Lyndon Johnson had been arguably the most powerful man in the world at one point, had made incredible sweeping changes or led them in the United States that still, we have as a part of American legacy now. But she said at the end of his life, he had everything you could want. She said, I still remember this part of the speech. He had like floating things in his pool that would hold his drinks up, right, while he laid in his pool. But she said he died alone and he was miserable. And it really struck me, like right then, what does that say about like the definition of success? What is success? And I started to think more clearly at that point in my evolution as a student that I wanted to be involved in a kind of a more holistic approach to success. That's important to me. I come from a big family. Family's been important to me. And I was struck by a client that I have in Latin America who just a few weeks ago said it absolutely clearly. His name's Carlos. He said, if at the end of this process that we're working on with you and your team, if I have $1 billion and I'm miserable, that won't be success. But if I have $500 million and my family relationships are nurturing and harmonious most of the time, which was, I think, very wise, right? Then that to me will be success. And so that to me was a very kind of adept way at saying like, success is not for him and it's not for me. And I don't know what it is for you. That's for all of us to decide, I think, individually, is not just having, one more shekel on the pile, but being able to say, what matters to me, and am I moving in the right direction towards achieving those things? So next one, Brent. So our firm FBCG, so there's 10 of us that are owners. There's about 35 of us that are consultants. We're based mostly in the Midwest. We've worked with now over 3,000 families. In fact, the family, I just remembered this, the family that I'm going to give you the case study was our 3,000th client. So which was kind of a fun little milestone. We are basically, a lot of us come from family businesses, a lot of professors, a lot of academics. There's a strange kind of mix of lawyers and consultants and therapists all kind of mashed up together. So, and we work really well together. We have a really wonderful culture. Our whole goal is that the family systems that we work with who happen to own large businesses define success and then move in that direction and achieve it. We take that very seriously, and we feel like family businesses are really important in every community around the world. They're the backbones of the economies there. And so taking care of them is really important, and helping them with good advice and to be able to have either continuity in a business or continuity in wealth and thereby influence, also really, really important. And we're dedicated to that idea. We've written bunches of books and bunches of articles and so that's who we are. Go ahead, Brendan. Our process is pretty straightforward as a professional service firm. We first, want to make sure that we're a good fit with our clients. We do a big discovery piece of what we do. The only times in my career that I've ever neglected a one-on-one interview with all the main players, I've regretted it. So that discovery process is really important. And it's in that discovery. I was talking with Stephen earlier today about some of the complexities of what we do. And as a recent example, I was working with two sisters-in-law their husbands had passed away. They had about almost $1 billion farming operation. And the first thing they both said to me was, I hate her, about the other one privately. I don't trust her. Every time she brings somebody in here to be an advisor, I don't trust them because she's the one who likes them. And it was one of those moments where you start to go, maybe there's a junior colleague that I could, introduce to this family, and let them cut their teeth, because we all know that there's very little that you can do when trust is gone, when hatred, really literally hatred, is there, and that it's been there for decades. So we go through that process. Go ahead and click all the way through to this list. We make recommendations, we collaborate with the client, and then we implement what we suggest to them. And that's really important to us and to them, that they understand, we're not dropping a big golden folder that they can, put on their shelf. So
If I can ask a quick question. So as you're assessing the family, I think it's more often than not, when we talk to our clients, they say the family dynamic is great. I hear that a lot. Oh, it's great. We're good. And then all of a sudden you kind of peel back the onion. You're like, this is not great at all. What's the process you go through to kind of evaluate the relationships and the situations, the dynamics with that? Because I think we find it that we're in, kind of rolling up our sleeves, going through the data, doing the planning. And then are there questions or things we can ask that would help us kind of figure out, okay, there really is some underlying issues that need to be worked through, not by a nerd, not your number nerd like me.
it's a great question, Brett. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later as a part of what happens, and we need to be really aware of it. And we try and teach this to our junior folks as they come in, is that it's natural that they're not going to trust us completely when we start, because of the dynamics. There's so many different people that are there that have different ideas, that have different kind of lenses that they look at the world through. As we often say, in a family ownership scenario, especially into a third generation, you've got an array of people that's from, I call it the artists who want to feel good about the whole process, to the engineers who need to calculate every single step along the way and know where it's going. So if you're going to build trust, and you're going to eventually get to a point where they're going to really tell you what they think, it's going to take time. And all we really feel like we can control in that is to say, here's the process we go through. We want to hear your ideas. We'll integrate that into a kind of a three-dimensional image that we're building about this whole system together. And in the back of our minds, we know that it's just going to take time. And there's one slide that I'll get into really specifically where I go through like the basic level of trust, the next level of trust, and then the real level of trust when people really start to tell you what's going on. And that now you've built trust, and you have to keep it if you're going to get to a good solution. Thank you for that question. Okay, next one, sustainment. So here's the client. Just go ahead and put it all up there if you can see that. So Bob is 72. He's married, but his wife, who's 65, is not the kid's mom. And there's 3 kids. Joe, Ed, and Karen, each of them are married with children, except Karen. She's just recently married. She doesn't have any kids yet. Okay. And then there's the family by choice, right? So this is an interesting element of what we do also. And we are all a part of this. I was married for a long time, and I remember that was the only choice I ever made in my family, was whether to get married or not. Everybody else literally just kind of showed up, right? I mean, you got in-laws all of a sudden, whether you like them or not. Some of those in-laws go away, replaced by new ones. You've got children, you choose to have children, but you really don't have much to say about their personality. I think we all know that if we have kids. And then you've got the people that you choose, right? The folks that you really, really build kind of this rapport with, and feel as though you've been through like the trenches of life's wars, that you absolutely trust and have for many times. So for Bob, we'll call him F. He's the non-family CEO, and he's been with Bob for 42 years. There's G, she is the CFO, like a sister to Bob. And then there's Dan. Dan's been around for 40 years and he's like a brother. So there's a very long standing dynamic of trust between this group of what I would call siblings by choice. Okay. And they're all trying to figure out what to do with a business, which I'll introduce to you, real estate assets, and then the next generation. How do you make that work? Go ahead, next slide. So there's to give you a little bit of a sense of who they are, a little bit more kind of graphically. Genograms, we use them all the time. I don't know if you guys use them, but very helpful especially for the folks that are more kind of visual and need that kind of an approach in their learning and in integration. Next one. So the business, go ahead and click through it. It's a mid-size, full-service general contractor, 200 full-time employees. They're in the West. It started in 1980, about $330 million in annual revenue. They've got 3 really big clients, and those clients have worked with them for many, many, many years. So which is hard to do, right? These are publicly owned companies that they do buildings for. And if you're going to deal with a giant publicly owned company and the wheel of their own kind of internal careers where there's buyers and decision makers who are consistently, retiring or being promoted or being let go. So to build relationships with a group like that for that many years is significant. And that stuck out with, in my mind, as we were doing the discovery phase. It's like, this says something about the culture here, right? There is some sort of magic sauce that's in this, okay? And I learned more about their culture, and they said, we as a group have loyal employees, and the way we create that loyalty is we'll fire our clients if they don't treat our people and our subcontractors well. And they brag about that. And to me, that was really significant because, again, here the question is, how do you get the next generation to not, to integrate into this successful model, not to come in and say, oh, I got to change everything because I need to make a mark because, I'm not my dad, but because there's a successful machine that's pumping out money and that's employing 200 families or helping 200 families, right, as an employment scenario for many, many years. This is a big issue down here, which is that over those 40 years, Bob has just decided to buy property for fun. As he would put it, he said, I'm a realaholic. So he loves real estate. And he's bought properties and kept them. And people in the community know that if they need cash, for instance, and they need somebody who will pay a fair price, and he's very proud of that, he'll be able to do it quickly. And so he's got 55 different properties, some of those with his partners, non-family friends, others with his kids, which they didn't choose. We'll get into that. Okay, next one. And any questions along the way, or if you want to jump in, I can talk about this for a long time. So on the ownership side, this is in your world. And just to be clear, so I got an MBA. I hated accounting. Like, it was the biggest nightmare for me. I loved strategy and marketing and operations. So a big part of this, and Bill and I talked about this, and Corey with us, was this idea that there are teams of people that are really important for our clients. Teams that also have kind of that artist to engineer approach, where we can see from different perspectives together how individuals inside the system who have influence on the success or the failure of it can work together to find the best kinds of solutions. Not just about money and the minimization of estate tax, not just about, how do we all get along and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but some mixture of all of that so that we can get on the same page and move forward together without arguing all the time or hiring a lawyer for every, comma on any kind of an agreement that we might have. Thinking there again of those 2 sisters who said, we hate each other, because that really happened. The lawyers, commas, clauses, all that. Go ahead, Brandon. So the market value of the construction company is around $20 million. They don't have a lot of assets. They're a pure general contractor. The ownership, this is important, and you'll have questions about this, I'm sure. Bob owns 70%. F owns 20%. So he's the non-family CEO. And Joe, the oldest son, owns 10%. So you'll have questions. How did he get 10%? Why did that happen? 330 million sales, producing about 6.5 million in net income. And there's a buyout agreement that exists between Bob and F. Whoever passes last has the right of first refusal to buy control of the company. That one really surprised me. And, the question of why that happened was answered with a lot of, oh, boy, it's warm today. Gosh, can you believe, why did this happen again? Well, and they changed the subject. So I'm in the middle of working through that because that's a potential headache. Yeah. The whole system. Yeah, the real estate holdings, the family relationships, the business succession planning. It's a very much a holistic approach. Yeah, thank God I wasn't hired just to work on the construction company, or I would be in trouble. Yeah. The market value of B's real estate property is about $200 million. 44 million of it is owned with others, so it's about 244 in terms of his own assets. Net is probably 110, about 120. As he said recently, used to be 130, but it's probably now about 120, 115. So, and the real estate produces between $5 and $6 million in free cash flow. Okay. Next one. So the question to them, and this is an early question for me, is how do you measure success, right? We're doing this. We're going to go through a process. What are we trying to get to? I was a huge fan of Stephen Covey, knew him from his days at Harvard, and loved the idea you begin with the end in mind, right? What is the goal? Where are we trying to get to? If we get to a certain point and we are successful at that point, what does that look and feel like? And so I asked them that question, and here's kind of the way that they went through it in their answers. Go ahead. They liked revenue growth on the business side. So this first slide's more about the business answers, the financial answers, the metrics. We like profitability. Our target is over 4%. But I gotta say, when I asked that question, what is the right amount of profit? One of them said 7. The other said 3. Bob, the founder, said, doesn't matter as long as we're growing. And so I made sure they understood this is a little bit of a disconnect and we need to have some piece of it. But they did then clarify a priority, which is so important here also. It's like, if we're growing, if our revenue's growing, and if we're profitable, and if we're not losing long-term clients, and if we're not losing our best people, if we're not losing our best subcontractors, that's okay. So that was interesting to me, that the measure of net income or profitability on a job or at the end of the year was not something that they prioritized. Next one. Employee satisfaction. Go ahead and rip through them, Brendan. Reputation. Do subs want to work for us, right? The quality and timeliness, the safety, a lot of the normal construction KPIs that you would run into, but also the culture. Do the right thing, not what makes us or saves us the most money. We want to work with people we like. And, Bob, the founder, bragged a bunch of times, told me stories of firing clients because they didn't like them. And he thought they were a pain in the ass, as he would say. So I fired him because I'm the owner, so I can fire him. He's got quite a personality. If that hasn't come, it probably hasn't come out yet. This is a guy who name drops like you can't believe. And loves to talk about, his private jet and those things. But quirky with a big heart. Also talks about how much money they give away, and even compares the amount of money that they give away to some of his business colleagues in his neighborhood, which I thought was interesting. But that's him. That's who he is. And that's important, right? Because the question of legacy starts there. It includes, in this case, F, G, and Dan. They also have a part in it. But if you've got 70% of the ownership and the voting rights, and you've got $240 million worth of real estate. It's, you can't just ignore the idea that this is the most powerful voice in the group. And I'm going to get into that question. Stephen and I, again, I'm calling him out. We had a great conversation earlier about like, who's the client in this scenario? I'm not a lawyer, but I know that for an attorney, the question of the client is almost the most important piece of that, right? Because of the legal ramifications of that distinction. Okay, next one. But then I asked the question, all right, so that's the business side. That's the stuff we can measure. But what about in the holistic approach? Like, what's going to feel successful? Because there are feelings here. Obviously, it's a family business. You can't have a family business or a family ownership group and not consider the question of feeling, right? I have a colleague who says all the time, having a family business without emotion would be akin to trying to, have a spreadsheet without numbers in it. Right? I mean, it's that element that's so important to us. So the words they use to describe success in the family or in the whole system: harmonious, respectful, loving, supportive, trusting. And if you think about this, it's an interesting conundrum. I mean, we can say we like 4% net income or 4% profitability, and we can measure that. We can know that that was the goal, and then we can measure if we hit that goal. This is a lot harder, right? If you say, I want more support in the family, I want more trust in my relationships with my kids, I want more loyalty, whatever those kind of emotions are, really hard to gauge. Almost the best you can do is saying, that was the goal. We started there. Have we moved in the right direction between that time and today? But also we would say, if we don't have these things in life, Lyndon Johnson, was he a successful guy? We'll leave that question out there.
As you go through that evaluation of this whole success, how do you involve the other team members? Like, because obviously one of the big things that we talk about with the council is just collaboration and true collaboration. It's not like, oh, we kind of work on a meeting here and there together. It's like, how do you get the family around the table with the other advisors to address? Because I would think that it's not all questions about, oh, well, I don't like that person. Okay, great. Well, now we have to evaluate that. I don't like that person, but it's because I don't want them to get $1 more than I get. And then you sit there and you say, okay, well, then how do we pivot and talk about numbers while talking about these softer skills?
That's a good question. And I'll be honest, I don't think I'm as good at that as I want to be. We have, I'm working right now with an investment bank in New York on a client in Latin America. And there's distance between us, and he has a team of a couple people and I have a team of a couple people. And then the client has, internal folks. And we have tried to create an ongoing kind of cadence of, here's what I'm hearing, here's what I'm learning. What are you hearing? What are you learning? And, the hard truth is it's difficult to do. In a best case scenario, I can think of a client that I did work with in the Middle East, where we had a standing bi-monthly, every other week, where we together basically shared notes, talked about the goals, reminded each other of where we're trying to get the client to, and then said, where are the weak spots, where are the strong spots. That's a big challenge, right? It's a big challenge.
And I would take it that at certain times in the process, certain people are involved. I mean, if there is an exit for the business, they're actually going to go for liquidity, then you involve an investment banker. But if it's estate planning versus business planning, it may require different, obviously, disciplines on the legal side. How do you kind of sequence that through? I mean, and who's typically the quarterback, and maybe tell a little bit about the team composition?
So the most recent example, to give you more of the gory details of those two sisters who hated each other, sisters-in-law, is, early on, the recommendation was, you need to sell this business. Like, there's no way that you're going to get along. They couldn't choose board members, because one of the first things that we wanted to try and create was a board. A board's supposed to be objective, right? And supposed to have a fiduciary responsibility for the good of the company and its shareholders. But every time we would try and get to, let's have Bill on the board. Well, if you like Bill, I don't like Bill, right? Well, then let's have Stephen on the board. Well, I don't like Stephen just because you like Stephen, right? And so this question of how, who's running that in this case moved to they had an executive chairman that they had chosen together. As the only, me and the executive chairman were the only folks that they had chosen and agreed to. So we created a team approach to say, like, we're quarterbacking this together. The more that you and I, this was me and his name was Richard, the more that you and I can have a unified front, really, that we're on and not just visually, but the fact that we're really working together for the good of this group kind of helped quarterback a lot of the rest of the communications. And to your point, as the bankers started to come in, again, we ran right into the same question. It's like, oh, you brought in these bankers. Well, we don't like these bankers then because you brought them in. And that we continue to say the goal here is to maximize the value of the business, but also to do it in a way that the relationships that are created through the transaction would move on forward, as they now had lumps of cash that they had to deal with, and also tens of thousands of acres still that they owned together. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, that's great. Thank you.
okay. But that's a complicated piece. And we'll get back to the question of how do you build trust with the client, and then how do you model trust building between them? And then in ownership, when we ask them, like, what is it that you want to look to for success in this area? They said, we really, more than anything, want to protect our family's reputation. We want to preserve wealth and we want to grow it, but we want to be stewards. And that's a big thing for Bob, is that he wants his kids, especially his two sons, to feel a sense of stewardship and gratitude, and to be able to understand the culture and how hard it was to create that kind of a culture in such a cutthroat industry, and to honor it. And that's the biggest challenge, frankly, is because he does not feel that. And I'll, from my perspective, his sons don't get it yet, and they might not. And so that's the challenge we're trying to figure out, as well as how to, protect the assets, protect the business, and make sure that the non-family folks are taken care of too in the whole process. Okay, next one. So key points about that we got into that are in the middle of the conundrum of this whole thing. Go ahead. If the first generation wants the second generation to be involved at the company on a day-to-day board level, then that's fine as a goal. Okay, as a goal for the first generation. And I put in a point here about hats. Okay, one of the first kind of aha moments I had early on in my career came from a guy named Stu Leonard. Any of you from Connecticut, perchance? You ever been to Stu Leonard's grocery store? Okay, Stu Leonard's is a place that is well known in that part of Connecticut for great customer service. Stu Leonard told a story once in front of about 90 people at a Harvard Business School program that I was teaching at. And he told the story that I'll never forget. He said, I hired a board like all these consultants told me to do. And as soon as the board got comfortable, they said, you need to fire your son. And he said, I'm not going to fire my son. And they said, well, that's why you hired us, is to give you good advice. And that's the best advice we got. And he said, how do I fire my son? And they said, you're a smart guy, figure it out. But he's not good for the business. Problem was, he was an owner of the business, his son and Stu. But he told this story, okay? And this is true. I checked it with Tom, who's on the other end of this discussion. He said, I called Tom into my office and I had two hats sitting on my desk. And he said, Tom, I called you here as the chairman of the board. So I'm putting on my chairman of the board hat. You're fired. Like, you're doing terrible. You set goals. You don't hit your goals. You make excuses for not hitting your goals. You go on vacation right before Thanksgiving. It's like, we're in the grocery business, right? I mean, he was really impassioned about this. But then he said, now I'm taking off my chairman of the board hat and I'm putting on my father's hat. My dad had. And he really said this. I checked with Tom. your mother and I heard you just lost your job. And I said, you really said that? And he goes, and he's a strange man. Like Stu is a very quirky guy. But then he said, what the hell's wrong with you, Tom? Like you're miserable. And Tom, now I interviewed Tom and had him give a presentation the next time to tell his side of the story. He said, Dana, when he said that, I was 50% thrilled beyond belief that he fired me. And on the other hand, I was sad. And I said, why were you sad? He goes, he's my dad. I love my dad. Like nobody wants to disappoint their father. And I said, well, why were you happy? And he said, I hated working for him. It was miserable. It's like I was 16 years old again. At this point, Tom was 40 years old. And he said, your store's not clean enough. He said, it felt like you're not picking up, your room, or you're not taking out the garbage on time. So the question of hat, I always use that example early on because the artists and the engineers and everybody in between can get that analogy. I put on my father's hat and we're having a different conversation. I put on my chairman of the board hat and you're an owner, we're having a different conversation. If I put on my CEO hat and you work for me, we're having a different conversation with different parameters. So the question of, if they're going to be involved at the company on a day-to-day or board level, if that's Bob's goal, like what hat do you think he's got on when he says this? Dad. Who said that? Yeah, it's his dad hat. Why? Oh, I love my kids and I want to be with them and I want to be close together. Okay. If he's got his CEO hat on, that would not be the goal because they're not very good at their jobs so far. One of them is pretty good at one part of it. Okay. So go ahead. Next point, Brandon. If the answer is, I want them to find their strengths, live a happy and fulfilling life with their spouses and kids, that's a whole different thing. Now that's still the dad hat, but that's a different approach. That's a selfless dad hat, I would say, right? John Ward started the Family Business Consulting Group, really well known in the world of family business. He used to always say, we are gardeners as parents. We should be gardeners, not sculptors, gardeners. We plant seeds and we want them to have sunshine and grow into whatever it is that they grow into. Sculptors have an idea of a block of marble or wood, and we know exactly what we want to come out of that block. Okay, so I'm setting up some of the decisions here. Go ahead, next one, Brandon. Has the scope of a happy life for these two been constrained by the comfort and the trappings of the company and their hope to prove themselves to him? Absolutely. I haven't told you any of this yet. They both live in homes that their dad owns on a big kind of compound of property, and they don't pay anything for it. They're in their 40s, right? So you can see now as we get to the question of what about the estate and the next generation, and what about giving them, certain assets? Like this is a major, major problem, right? Very much they've been constrained. This is, by the way, the topic of our next meeting, which is going to take place on the 16th of October, which is, Bob and I have met separately and talked through this question. What do you want for them? And what are the steps to get them there? Because what you're doing right now is not working for your goals. And here's a question. Why hasn't he changed any of that? What's your guess? Doesn't trust them to succeed without him. That's one idea. Okay. One thing you don't know about him is he cannot stand confrontation. That's why he hired F, because he's the F guy. Let's put it that way. Like he'll poke people in the eye and he'll confront them. Very much a general contractor, tough guy. But Bob will avoid it at all costs. He gets physically kind of shaken by the idea of disappointing his kids. Okay, next one. Is it possible for J&E to prove themselves to Bob and the others, more importantly, in my opinion, to themselves inside the company? Can they prove themselves inside the company? What do you think? Maybe. Yeah. What are the parameters that you think would make it possible for them to prove themselves? They can't answer to Bob, right? They probably can't even answer to F because he's like an uncle to them. So being able to create a world where they can succeed and prove to themselves that they're capable is so important,
To
right?
the point you made earlier, are the kids open to talk? Like, do the kids feel like it's a safe space for them to talk to their dad or about what their maybe desires are? Like,
That's a great question. No, not yet. And that's part of my job. And in the world of in your world, right, the discussion with more than one person in the system about what do you know, let's say there is a liquidity event and there's $100 million in assets. Doesn't mean it manages itself, right? I mean, how do you talk through these different questions of what do you want versus what you want versus what you want, charitable side, you know, risk, right? Growth, all those questions. So no, it's a good question. There is not a safe space. And I learned this by in the discovery process where E basically, I had an hour and a half with him. No lie. He didn't stop talking the whole time unless I interrupted him. He just, blah, 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 Dad, this, blah. And I was like, okay, what about, blah? And he would just go and go and go. And I realized that's not helpful in terms of a conversation. It was a monologue. And I asked him at the end, I said, do you realize we've been here for 90 minutes and you talked the whole time? And he said, oh, I did? And I said, yeah, I just wanted to point that out to you. Do we need to have another hour and a half? And he said, and he felt bad about it. And I said, no, it's okay. I'm just observing at this point, just trying to understand. And the question of, do you feel like you're being heard was kind of an obvious no, right? Okay, next one.
And how would you bridge that? I mean, when you sit down, I mean, how do you create that dialogue if they can't do it themselves? Like, what type of things are you doing?
Well, this gets back to the question of who's the client. The client is the good of the whole in this. And so it's my job to say, here are the dynamics I saw early on, where there was monologue, there wasn't discussion or conversation. There was kind of a desire to convince, right, is what was going on. And that's a dynamic that's not going to help if together through 2 generations, we're going to create a plan for the future. It's my job to kind of to highlight that. And I set that up early on to say, like, my goal is to tell the truth to you in a way that's helpful to you. And so I kind of have given myself license to say things like that. Yeah. 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 If you all heard that, right? There's one, fix my kids. And there's another side of that spectrum, which is, look, I'm open to anything here. I want this to get better. I mean, there's always the risk that finger pointing starts. And once it starts, it's kind of a slippery slope of, no, I only did that because you did this. Well, I did that because of what you did. And so I start out by saying, look, you hired me to try and help you improve a system. Okay. I've done this a lot, 300 times. So I'm going to be good enough at this that you'll trust me, but it's going to take some time. And then when we get to that point, we'll be able to have real conversations about the real issues that we're dealing with here and real kind of focus on the steps to take to get us to more onto that side of the point, which is, what do we need to do now in order to get on the same page? Right? Yeah. We have therapists in our group. Yes, the question was in terms of kind of individual therapeutic needs. Do we have therapists that we recommend when you run into those kinds of behavioral questions? And we have therapists in our team. So we have business folks and strategy folks and therapists and academics all together. So we populate teams based on what we see. And which creates a challenge. It's a good point because you don't see it, like to your point, you don't know really what's going on when you start. You really don't. They're just presenting issues that they want you to see. And then as you gain their trust, then you start to realize, and I'll tell you some pretty deep ones here in a second, where you say, you know what, I need some help here from somebody that's got more specifics. You know, I'll give you an example. One of my clients, very successful real estate person up in Canada. He's got 3 kids. One of the kids was really troublesome, and something was off with her. And you could feel it in the way that she interacted with her siblings and her dad. And over time, I came to realize that she had an eating disorder, which was, right, that's a medical issue. And so, you know, I put up the red flag and said, this is way beyond my pay grade. But I do have one of my colleagues who had written papers in grad school and studied and worked in hospital systems throughout, actually in Canada too. And he was able to really make strong suggestions. How are we doing on time? I feel like I want to make sure that I'm.
We have about maybe 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
open for questions, so please don't hesitate to just chime in as everybody else has.
And I think Bill and I talked about a part 2 to this. If you want me to come back and kind of tell you how it's going, and I'm going to look to some of you also for some advice that you'll see in this question of, well, he's got all this real estate and an operating company, and you know how to protect that over time. I'll talk more about it, but next one, Brandon. If the first generation, you know what, let's go through this. Just go ahead to the next slide. I want to make sure that we get into the questions of trust. Okay, so this is to this question that we all deal with. Like if we want to be trusted advisors and provide real value, we have to earn their trust. And that comes at their pace. They decide. They either trust us or they don't, right? Just like you trust me or you don't. I trust you or I don't. Early on in this work, the presenting issues were succession, timelines, what are the job descriptions, you know, that my sons can have against which we can judge their performance. What's the structure, you know, how big are the dollars, what's the ownership scenario? Very kind of straightforward, quantitative pieces of information. In the second phase, what I would call, again, the second level of earning their trust, they talked about the perceived talent gaps in the second generation. E is good at this. He's not good at this. J is great at this. He's not great at this. Frustration with the communication style that we got to, which is we can't really talk with our dad, right? We can't have a conversation without feeling as though we're being lectured to. I can't really talk to my sons because I don't feel like they're listening. All they want to do is tell me that I'm doing it wrong, even though I've built this company. Yeah. No, and that's a big one. Like if there's a takeaway that, you know, if you've got clients that have active family businesses, I mean, you can't really judge performance unless you know what the expectation is. And as simple as that is, it just doesn't happen very often, right? So there weren't clear job descriptions, and it's something that they're working on. Perceptions of the second generation. So this is where I started to really understand, you know, the element of culture and how the second generation was clashing. Okay. So I'll tell you, I was finished with some meetings, and the E in the sibling group, he wanted to walk me out to my car, which was back behind their building, and they had built their buildings beautiful. And as we came out the door, there was this giant Jeep that had been lifted and had every possible thing right next to the door. And he made a point, you know, kind of secretively in his pocket to like click the doors as I was walking by it so that it kind of went, And I said, "Oh, is this your Jeep?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "This is one of my 3 Jeeps just like this." And I was like, come on, man. I didn't say that then, but I'm thinking this is how you show who you are as a part of this culture by parking this is huge. Monstrosity right here. And it would be one thing if he had built the company, but because he was in the inheritor's role, it just screamed out, you know, nepotism and overindulgence. And so then into the next level of trust. And here is where, I started to realize we were going to be able to get some things done. So the divorce between B and his first wife, the infidelities, okay, that they started to talk about, the emotional breakdowns that had happened, financial entitlements in the second generation. So I didn't know up until this, later on, that they didn't own their own homes, and that they're all married. Can you imagine being married to a guy whose dad is paying for your house? Right? I mean, this was precarious, and strife in the second marriage also. And then there was, I don't think I put it in there. There was a real tragedy that had taken place in Bob's life, where his brother had committed suicide, and that he had never brought it up. Nobody had brought it up until one person, later on in our early process said, "You need to understand this. This is who he is." He's never talked to anybody about it, and it happened pretty close to home. And that's where you start to realize that you're being led into the realities of these systems. It's not just dollars and cents. It's not just, the trust that they've created and the assets that they have, but really complicated questions about life and purpose and existence and future and legacy, and these deeply, deeply kind of emotional, personal things. Go ahead, next one. So key questions here that probably have gone through your head. Go ahead. Who is the client in this scenario? Who is the client here? The family. Okay. How do you define the family? Only the related ones? Family of choice. So we're related if we choose to be related. Okay. I like that. Any other thoughts about that? All the stakeholders. Maybe the person who for 25 years has been an executive assistant to G, for instance, whose daughter now works at the company. That's a stakeholder, right? Would they be the client? They'd be considered. They're considered as part of the culture, right? And the idea of loyalty. But it's complex, right? Because G actually signs the checks. Yeah, G signs the checks, right? And I didn't know that until, further along, where Bob said to me, "Don't ask me about stuff like that. Have your accounting people talk to G. She's the one. She'll do it." Okay, next question. Next one. How are the real estate assets held? So there's 8 trusts, F and B. So Bob and F are the trustees. The kids are not always beneficiaries. I just barely got into that question with him just recently, so I need to dig further into it. Okay. Next one. Is the stepmom bought out? It's a non-issue. There's a prenuptial agreement that took place, and she does, she had a successful career when they married. And as he put it, I told her, I'll give her whatever I want to, if that's okay with her. And she said, that sounds good. And then there's a prenup. Yeah. It's like, we'll see if that works. But she's a really important part of the process in terms of Bob. She's very supportive of him. They have some strife that they talk about. Next one. Our key employee is staying after B, and he's 72, but he's going to be around for a while. At the same time, F is really the one running the company day to day.
Now, being the young guy in the room.
Yeah.
I noticed that all of them are probably in their 60s.
Yes.
So who's taking on the next level of succession?
Uh,
You have a CFO, a COO, and a CEO that are probably 60, the early 60s.
Yep. Mid. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's a big question that we've got. And answering that question from the second generation's perspective is very interesting. I asked them, who do you see as the next leaders? And the biggest help actually in that question was that they didn't care that much about the construction company when I asked that question, like who's going to take over. They wanted to talk about the real estate assets and how their dad was mismanaging them. He's not maximizing, the return on these properties. And that's a big issue, right? Is how much change the next generation wants to create and how quickly, and how much change the current generation is willing to allow. Go ahead. And those employees that are long-term, they'll stick around probably for as long as they have a sense that the culture is going to be intact and it's going to be protected. So my guess is if everybody in what I would call the old guard said, you know what, we're going to go and fly our jets around and have fun and live in Montana and do good things, that a lot of the folks beneath them would say, maybe it's a good time for us all to kind of retire and go forward. So it's a big risk. Next one. Do the key employees respect the second generation? No, they really don't. Jay is very good as an engineer, and there are people will point out that he's saved their clients millions of dollars with his engineering mind. But there's nothing that anybody would point to with E and say he's fantastic at what he does. It's a big issue. Okay, next one. Last point. Do the key employees have a farm team? To your point, there's some pretty good folks. Maybe I'll stop here because I think we're about out of time, and just field questions. Yeah, Stephen. Yeah. So over the years, I've kind of picked up a trick that in my own mind, I didn't know I was doing this, honestly, but I would write, so I write a proposal, we negotiate the proposal out, and then I write a letter of engagement. And in the letter of engagement on purpose, I write the family. And then I want to see what they come back with. And that's basically what it is. Like if they're willing to sign the agreement with the family's name, or a lot of times they'll say, you know what, we'll put it under this LLC, or this is our family trust. And so, then it becomes that piece of it. But I make sure and reference the proposal that specifies that the way that this is going forward is with the family as the client. Yeah. And it's probably really like dangerous from a legal perspective. I'm sure it is, but hey, it's worked out so far. It's worked out. Yeah, please. In a lot of ways, we become quarterbacks because there's, the way these systems evolve, people kind of see and a lot of times it's dad's or mom's plan, and it's their baby. And so what they've set up is the way it is, and they either kind of integrate with that or they don't. And if they integrate with that, there's already terrific counselors and advisors, but that there's now these new kind of factions of, well, do we want to keep doing it in that way? So in a lot of ways, when we come on, we become like a quarterback and start to say at a high level of strategy and getting alignment, here are the pieces that we're trying to put together, and then able to take that, to the teams of the specialists who can, kind of stick it into the right, the right place and write the contracts and the agreements that fit. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. I work on retainer agreements, not on an hourly. We used to do hourlies and dailies, but had, a lot of knowledge over the years that what we do is unique, and that we felt like we were shortchanging our firm, and really in many ways shortchanging the client by saying, oh, when you had that thought in the shower on Sunday about the thing we've been talking about for 6 months, that's the real value that was coming from this, and not that we had spent 20 minutes, on it on Friday morning. So it's retainer agreements by and large. I'd say out of our group, we're probably 50% kind of annual, like a 12-month engagement with monthly payment on it. We really try and build a very open, trusting relationship. So I've many times gone to my clients and said, I think you're paying me too much money. You guys are easier to work with than I thought. Thank God they've never said you're right. They've said, no, we're happy. We're on the right track. Or I've gone to them and said, you're overworking me here. I didn't know that your Uncle Jimmy was going to be nuts, and that he was going to call me every 20 minutes, on a weekend and tell me how, stupid you are, So, and then we adjust it that way. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay. It's word of mouth. Our website, I mean, we are the biggest family business consulting firm in the world. We've been around for 30 years. So if anybody needs succession planning and governance in family business, they'll find us with searches. We get a lot of word of mouth referrals from clients. We do things in associations. We write a lot of articles and books. Yeah. And that's a great challenge for our marketing team. So we have a staff of about 10 people. All of us bring back these stories where we say, I got a call from somebody who, again, was stunned that we've been around for 30 years. Like, what are we doing about this? We never really have broadcasted things. It's a great, if you got ideas, let me know, because it's constantly on our minds. Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
Engagement being unhappy. And then would you see what percentage of the times do you stay engaged with the family long term in a relationship?
Yeah, good question. The discovery process usually takes about 3 months. The individual interviews, depending on how many stakeholders that they have, are a big part of that. And then I like to have them all together for usually 2 half days to walk through, do teaching on one hand, and then talk about the issues, that came up. So that's about 3 months. And then I would propose like an implementation phase, and that usually would last 12 to 18 months. And a lot of times that's creating objectivity, the job descriptions, the expectations, first of all, defining success and the principles and priorities that they're working with. And then, I've had a client for 20 years that just has said, we don't really need you, but we know we're going to, so we'll pay you a little bit of a retainer until, my nephew decides that out of college he wants a job, or somebody passes away, or there's a divorce, or there's a board, somebody goes to a conference and hears about, redefining their board, and so they want to kind of go into that. But I would say on average, the whole relationship's probably 18 months, maybe 2 years. And the reason that it takes so long is they've been building all these patterns for decades, right? They've been building kind of these deep grooves in the road that they're trying to figure out how to get out of. Yeah. We do. Yeah, internal family offices, multifamily offices, private family offices after some sort of a big event. Yeah. We do, because the same questions, right? You guys know that it's like you got wealth. It doesn't mean all your problems are solved, right? You've got to have some sort of an alignment about who we are as a family. What do we want to do individually? What do we want to do together? What if somebody wants to start a new business, right? All the same questions. So, all right.
Well, thank you. Anything else? All right. Okay.
I will say too, I apologize that I didn't bring business cards. That was my fault. I was up really early this morning and wanted to make sure I was here, but I do have contact information in the back of the presentation.
Thanks so much, Dana. Brett, really appreciate your insights as you poked in. Thanks all for coming. This is just such an important topic in my mind, as I call it, the people side of planning, which is the most important aspect of wealth planning, transferring the assets and such. And of course, there's wealthy families that have stocks and bonds, and how to pass it on to the generation or prepare the family for the wealth. Now we have families with businesses, families with real estate enterprises, much more complicated. Family plus business is exponentially more complicated. So we will be dealing with part 2 and 3 and 4 going forward. Of course, we still have our original series that Brett was a part of, and our attorney back here, and investment banker, the business exit planning series. Those are coming up as well. RJ? Well, thank you so much. We'll see you in November.